All right. So we've talked about carbohydrates, which is one type of molecule or chemical that you can get energy from, the different types of sugars. But you've probably also heard of another type of biological or biology molecule called a protein. So you're probably used to protein being in hamburger or steak or chicken or meats, eggs. And if you are someone who works out a lot, maybe you even take a protein powder to try to grow muscle because muscle is protein. So let's talk a little bit about what proteins actually are. Proteins are special molecules that do two things for your body. One, they provide structure and support. So muscle proteins actually help provide support and move your bones. Collagen is like a fiber protein. Your fingernails are proteins that grow and support your fingers and protect the backs of your fingers. They also do something kind of secret, which is they are swimming through your bloodstream and inside of all of your cells, and your proteins actually help regulate your chemistry, microscopic, invisible, too small to see. So proteins play two roles: structure and regulation of chemical reactions inside of your body. So proteins are essentially just big molecules, just like carbohydrates, that are made by combining smaller ones. Carbohydrates, we got these big, long chains of starch and cellulose by combining lots of little sugars. In proteins, we don't use sugars, we actually use different molecules called amino acids. And you might have heard of these, especially if you ever look at the nutrition label on a jar of vitamins. Amino acids are the building blocks of proteins. So they kind of connect just like sugars do to make starch. Amino acids can combine to make proteins. Remember, though, that a lot of the starches is just the same sugar: glucose, 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 over and over again. Proteins actually, there are 20 amino acids. So if you think about it, you can connect them in a lot of different orders. You could connect amino acid 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 1 to 5 to 19 to 18 to 20. So there's lots of different patterns you can make. This works out because there are millions of proteins inside our bodies right now doing different things. The proteins and the order that the amino acids link up in to make your fingernail protein is very different than the protein in your stomach that helps you digest your lunch. So there's millions of proteins that are made from different patterns of just those 20 building blocks. It's kind of like if I gave you a big box of Legos. You have 20 different kinds of Legos. You have 6 pieces and little ones and bigger ones. But you can make a lot of things out of those types of just 20 different types of blocks. So this picture shows you that like a train car, and the protein's made out of connecting amino acids, and those special chemical bonds between each amino acid is what we call a peptide bond, and that just joins all the proteins together. And I think this is kind of a funny cartoon. You can put together amino acids and make this big, strong protein that does a lot of important things. Proteins actually have multiple shapes. So these really squiggly, ridiculous, complicated, almost like ribbons all tangled up, those are proteins. And it's kind of like a ball of yarn. To study proteins, scientists have to unravel them and stretch them out and look at the order that each thing goes. And then once they're all together, they kind of react and ball up into this actual crazy string structure. So one way to think about it is we can study proteins like an alphabet. Amino acid A connects to B, connects to C. But once you start folding and changing their shape, you get words and sentences and paragraphs. So more and more complex as we go. So we're going to move on and talk a little bit about a very, very special and important type of protein, and that's called an enzyme. This is a super, super important vocabulary word, so please make sure that you take notes or understand what it means. An enzyme is a special protein that swims around in your body, through your cells and your bloodstream and all over your body, and speeds up your chemistry. Without an enzyme, it would take you days, maybe even weeks, to digest your lunch. So you wouldn't be ready to eat dinner again right away. You would have to wait like a month or weeks to eat dinner because your body would actually break down your lunch and get the nutrients very slow. So enzymes are nature's fix to that problem. Enzymes swim around, you eat a sandwich for lunch, enzymes in your stomach go after that sandwich, they tear apart the starch and the glucose and the different proteins, they break all those bonds into really simple small sugars and amino acids, and then your body absorbs those smaller pieces. So enzymes are very important. They also help your brain communicate with the rest of your body. So they help make sure your muscles can work when you want them to, that you can bend your fingers on command. They make sure that when you get scared, your body gets, your legs get numb and you get that adrenaline rush. They help make sure that when you have something good happens, you can be excited and happy. So enzymes do a lot of different important things. And here's kind of how they work. The enzyme is kind of like the matchmaker. So you've got two things, and the enzyme comes along and combines them into one thing, and then it goes on its way. Or you can break something down. So you have an enzyme, you have one molecule, it kind of connects to the enzyme, and the enzyme breaks it back into two molecules. So there's three big vocabulary words: enzyme, which is the protein that actually speeds up a reaction; active site, which is the actual location on the enzyme where everything goes down; and then the substrate. And the substrate can be anything. It's whatever the enzyme is supposed to work on. So if you eat a baked potato and there's a lot of starch and your stomach is trying to break that starch down back into the smaller glucose sugars, then in that case the substrate would be starch, and there's a special enzyme that starch connects to and breaks apart. Enzymes are substrate specific, which means that you don't just have one enzyme that does everything. Every enzyme has a specific job. So you have an enzyme in your stomach that breaks down starch. You have an enzyme in your spit, actually, that also breaks down starch. You have an enzyme that breaks down proteins. So if you eat a fish or if you eat a potato, you have different enzymes that break each one down in a different way. Enzymes can also build molecules. So when your body is growing muscle, you go to the gym and you are working out, pumping iron, and you want your muscles to get bigger or more toned. You actually build new muscle through enzymatic or enzyme activity. So the same thing, you get your muscle, you get two new, amino acids, you have an enzyme, boom, they make a new muscle protein, and then your muscles grow. So enzymes aren't just destroyers, they're also builders. They do both. And this is probably the most complex slide because you have to remember a little bit about the starches that we talked about in the last video note segment. But it's just an important point. You need enzymes to break apart your food. And so here's an example of starch. You have your monomer, your monosaccharide, and your polysaccharide, and you have enzymes that do what's called dehydration. So you can see circled in green the H and the OH. You have an enzyme that sucks those two things out and connects the two blue circles together and makes an even longer chain of starch. On the right side, you have a tearing apart reaction where you actually add water back in with an enzyme and you split apart that starch molecule. So the right-hand side is probably more what happens in your stomach. The left-hand side, dehydration, synthesis. Synthesis just means to build something bigger, right? We could say our construction or our synthesis of a new building. That would sound kind of silly. But on the left-hand side is probably more what you would see in the liver. So you eat too much at Thanksgiving, or you eat too much, pizza, and so your body actually takes out water and starts combining all of those carbs and storing them as glycogen. And on the right-hand side, while you're digesting those and your body wants the energy, your body's going to add water back in and use an enzyme to break apart all that starch so that it can use the glucose. Your body likes to use simple things. So I know this has been a very complicated lesson on a lot of the biochem, but this is important stuff for where we're going in the future, and hopefully you followed along and found it kind of interesting. And we have another video lecture coming up to talk about enzymes and temperature.